Welcome to the Strive, Seek, Find podcast with me, Tom Heaton. Following my recent summary of the excellent Outlive by Attia and Bill Gifford, I wanted to expand on some of the key ideas that I took from the book. If you want to read the full summary, you can find it on my Substack page at striveseekfind.substack.com. And there is a huge amount in this book which it does take a bit of time to absorb. So I can also recommend a link to a podcast episode where Attia and Rhonda Patrick explore some of the key ideas in a bit more detail. And that is also available on my Substack page. With regards to my reflections, the first key message from the book that resonated with me was a recognition of the decreasing returns of the current medical system. Modern medicine, or medicine 2.0 as Attia calls it, is a fantastic thing. It has moved from the superstition and science-poor methods of medicine 1.0 to bring evidence of efficacy into clinical practice. The result is that we have now got very good at stopping the causes of fast death, and it is almost a shock for people to die from infections or from traumatic or surgical pathologies. Even the treatment of heart attacks and strokes has vastly changed over the recent years, albeit without quite the same fully transformed outcomes. However, the limits of medicine 2.0 appear to be twofold. Firstly, it has become overly dependent on the evidence-based approach that has been the very roots of its massive impact. This is not to say that evidence of efficacy is a problem. It most certainly is not. It is just that it sets the bar quite high for certain problems. If we want to be 95% sure of the positive impact of a therapy, the standard p-value being set at 0.05, then for anything other than massive effect sizes, we need very large samples. This means that we need to run experimental trials on large numbers of patients, often tens of thousands or more, to be able to scientifically answer the question with appropriate rigour. Now, if these effects happen quickly, then this is manageable, albeit expensive. We can quite quickly know if a therapy helps with a heart attack because the outcomes of interest, particularly death, evolve over a short time frame, allowing close study. This therefore leads to the second major problem of medicine 2.0. We are failing to manage chronic diseases with the same effectiveness. The burden on modern healthcare systems is hugely related to these diseases: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, frailty, chronic respiratory disease, and liver disease. If the pathology behind these diseases occurs over decades rather than months or years, then how can we rigorously study it? It is nearly impossible to actually run such experiments with clearly delineated study arms, that is, groups with separate treatments, never mind the cost of such an experiment. The result is that evidence-based medicine has only been applied to the very end stages of such processes, still serving as a prevention, but much later in the disease process. As such, we have a number of therapies that are very effective, such as statins, beta blockers, etc., but which have been implemented far too late in pathophysiological terms for the trajectory of the process to be altered as we would like. Attia's analogy for this is a powerful one. We physicians are desperately running around trying to catch eggs that have been thrown down from the nearby building, but what we really need to do is go up there and stop whoever is throwing them off. As someone practicing medicine in the modern NHS, this is quite a cutting observation. As I recently noted, even within the high-intensity world of critical care, the burden of chronic disease is a concerningly visible one. The challenge is that this quite dramatically undermines our abilities to help people. Decades of damage to the body cannot be undone with a few short-term interventions, even if we can fix some of the short-term overlying problems. The result is a blunting of medical effectiveness. We can often stop people dying, but can we get people better? The despondency that this realisation actually caused Attia led to him leaving the profession for a time, and it is not hard to see why. However, he found a renewed passion through a reimagining of the necessary approach, Medicine 3.0. His description of Medicine 3.0 is an eye-opening vision into a potential future of medical prevention. He does a brilliant job of articulating the evidence base behind each strand of intervention, honestly identifying where there is a limited strength of recommendation. Within this is the first big challenge that the model faces: evidence. We've got so used to the high confidence of many of our approaches that we've come to be almost snobbish in our demand for the highest quality clinical evidence of efficacy before we change our practice. These are the large randomised controlled trials and meta-analyses that I hinted at earlier. However, to answer the questions that we need to answer, we have to adjust our expectations and slightly lower our threshold. Much of the evidence will come from epidemiological studies or retrospective analysis of other work. This is highly vulnerable to the incorporation of our own biases. We can find what we are looking to find. As such, Attia notes that we have to be careful in our approach to the data. We need to use multiple sources, looking for strong evidence of signal convergence, and features such as a dose-dependent effect, which supports there being a true biological signal rather than statistical artifact or bias. Research techniques such as Mendelian randomization can also help, but undeniably remains less confident than the gold standard research methods that have created Medicine 2.0. Attia therefore uses the term evidence-informed instead of evidence-based label of Medicine 2.0. This seems a necessary restriction given the research context, but does mean we need to be honest about the messages and advice that get given. As Attia Riley notes, this is currently a problem with much of the nutrition landscape, where the strength of opinion on what is right seems closely matched to the paucity of the evidence. This confidence varies across the categories of his recommendations, with the research behind exercise actually being fairly strong and convincing. In contrast, the aforementioned challenges with research in nutrition mean that hard rules of action are nearly impossible to ascertain, and those that we have are quite narrow in scope. To me, this is just something that we need to factor into the risk versus benefit balance that informs all medical decisions. We may know more or less about the weighting of either side of this equation, and ultimately will be the balance of probabilities that will lead to a path forwards. With topics such as exercise and sleep, the weighting is so clearly unilateral that guidance can be given quite confidently, even without the strongest quality evidence. Ultimately, it becomes a case of clearly communicating this overall picture. Again, the second major challenge of Medicine 3.0 mirrors that of Medicine 2.0, chronicity. If the problems arise over a long period of time, they also need managing over a long period of time. Attia is clearly an individual for whom this comes naturally. He is driven, hard-working, and clearly actively enjoys the optimisation of his exercise and nutritional regimes. Indeed, I picture that there will likely be a degree of patient self-selection within his clinical practice. He cares for those who have a similar drive behind their self-care, otherwise they probably wouldn't be coming to his practice in the first place. I look around my current clinical environment and I don't see this. The people I see are focused on the challenges of living their current lives, often in environments of socio-economic challenge. A recognition of the benefits of close glucose control or of regular aerobic exercise or 8-hour solid sleep is not going to be heard when people are focused on the challenges of affording their heating bills and food with the same paycheck. I regularly see people who continue to drink, smoke and eat unhealthily, even once the harm to their bodies becomes immense. I am personally very lucky, with great opportunity for employing much of these ideas, but many will be beyond what I can achieve. I have, for example, accepted it as an impossibility to achieve the clearly beneficial levels of sleep. I have 2 young children and do shift work. There is zero chance of me having a set bed and wake time or getting a solid 7 to 8 hours sleep in a row for the foreseeable future. And the name of the game is chronicity. You have to be making these changes to your entire life so that you're doing them every single day, forever. I personally don't believe that many people will be able to do this. What therefore seems to be the biggest omission from this book is a spectrum of approaches for implementation. The guidance within is certainly all very valuable and useful, but only if it can be done. The benefits are all relatively weighted to the future, with the costs, as I'm sure some will view them, very much in the present. Given what we know about human psychology, this does not bode well for adherence. We have a strong tendency to burden our future selves, feeling a surprising degree of psychological distance from them. To be fair, these problems are all more within the domain of psychology and public health than within the scope of this book. Indeed, the entire purpose of this book is around longevity and the associated health span, hence the focus on articulating the benefits in these. But the many short-term benefits on well-being are also worth highlighting, more than they are here perhaps, especially so given that the greater leverage that they may provide. Sleeping and eating well and creating a fit body all have many positive short-term effects that are slightly understated here. Overall, the benefits across the full range of health seem substantial, but the implementation of much of it requires major changes in how you live, and these must be permanent. The motivation for this may be readily available for some people, given how clear these benefits are described, but this requires an investment in your future self that human psychology is often poorly suited for. How we are best engineering such changes into our lives remains a fascinating question. In summary, the book is an incredible map for navigating the route toward better health, but you need to find your own compass and walking boots. Thank you for listening. To keep up to date and to follow my writings, subscribe to me on Substack, which is striveseekfind.substack.com, or follow me on X at 2striveseekfind.